To me, I think there are certain WrestleManias that are overrated over the years. And on the flip side, there are those WrestleManias that I think are underrated over the years. One of my favorite WrestleManias of all time, and I think one of the five best WrestleManias of all time, believe it or not, is WrestleMania 7. That's right, I said it. Now, it's important to understand the historical backdrop of what was occurring in the country at this time. The U.S. was engaged in Kuwait with Iraq. You had the Persian Gulf War going on, so think about it in a post 9/11 world here in this country. Nationalism runs very high. There's extreme levels of patriotism. You're either with us or you're the enemy. Da 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 da. People know what I'm talking about here. It was no different back at this time. No different at all. And on the surface, you would think, with the primary storyline being the former American hero turned Iraqi turncoat sympathizer, Saddam sympathizer, and Sergeant Slaughter, defending his championship against the ultimate all-American white meat babyface in Hulk Hogan, would have been a monster draw. That everybody would want to see this. Everybody would want to see the U.S. conquer Iraq. It would want to see the ultimate good conquer the ultimate evil, and you would have drawn 100,000 plus people to this event. And on the surface, that's exactly what Vince McMahon and the WWF were expecting. This WrestleMania 7 card was originally scheduled to take place at the LA Coliseum, which was going to draw 100,000 plus people. That was the plan. They were going to outdo what they did 4 years earlier at the Pontiac Silverdome. They were going to draw 100,000 plus people to WrestleMania 7. However, as the WWF found out, Vince McMahon found out, everybody involved found out, is that sometimes heat doesn't equate to money drawn. You could draw the wrong type of heat. No, I'm not talking about X-Pac heat, a different type of heat. Sometimes you toe that line between pissing people off to the point where they want to pay money to see that heel get his ass kicked, and you can go too far, and as a result, the fans rebel against it and say, I don't care, you've pissed me off too much, I'm keeping my money. And WrestleMania 7 is kind of an example of that, because they eventually they tried to sit there and spin it that there were security concerns, and I'm sure there were some security concerns, but you had the Super Bowl outside a couple months before that in a huge stadium, and that didn't seem to be a problem. But the real reason was sluggish ticket sales. They kicked it inside to the LA Sports Arena. But what ended up happening, I think, was a really, really damn good show. There are several things of note on this show. The Nasty Boys beating the Hart Foundation to win the tag team titles, a really good tag match. You know, again, just speaking to the strength of the tag team division at this time in the WWF, who was really second to none in my opinion. And that was one of the major reasons I became a WWF fan. Once you got past the Hogan stuff and some of the other single stars, it were those tag teams that all had their own shtick. They all dressed similar when they were teams. You know, they had great tag team names. Their gimmicks match what they were doing and all of this other stuff. But the Nasty Boys and the Hart Foundation, a great contrast of performers, and ended up being a really good tag match here. And you had a new tag team champion in the Nasty Boys, who were popular for a period of time. This is where the Undertaker's streak began at WrestleMania. And of all people, he began it against Superfly Jimmy Snuka, a man who, if I remember correctly, never won a match at WrestleMania, taking on the guy who still to this day has never lost a match at WrestleMania. And it was kind of that perfect opponent for an Undertaker to make his WrestleMania debut. Snuka was a big star in the 70s. He was a big star in Vince's territory in the early 80s, even into the mid-80s with the Rock and Wrestling Connection and doing the Hulk Hogan cartoon and all this other stuff. Snuka had a name. He had some drawing power, even to this day. So he was known, he was legit, he was credible. And for Undertaker to go out there, you know, coming off the heels of his debut at Survivor Series 1990 and dispense of Superfly Jimmy Snuka in relatively short order, was very impressive, and that's a way to make a big-time statement with somebody that somebody's going to be a future big-time star. You had the Legion of Doom here beat the Powers of Pain in incredibly short order. You had Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich beat Dino Bravo, 5-star classic just because he beat Dino Bravo. Hell yeah, I don't give a shit. But there are two matches on this card that are two of my favorite WrestleMania matches of all time for entirely different reasons. One is Jake the Snake Roberts versus Rick Martel in the blindfold match. This match may or may not work in today's wrestling world. Probably would. But if I was going to take that chance that this match would ever work in today's wrestling world, the guy that I'd want and trust to pull it off would be Jake the Snake Roberts. These guys had a good piece of business going into it with Martel blinding him with his arrogance, and Jake the Snake at one point in time when the glasses came off in that Brother Love segment, and he's got the contact, and he's looking all types of fucking crazy. This was awesome. And you get to this match here at WrestleMania 7. I love this match because I believe that great matches tell a great story and really utilize crowd and in-ring psychology. And this match did just that. Jake the Snake Roberts sitting there pointing in different directions and working off of the crowd. It's like a genius way to involve the crowd from beginning to end. You sit there and he gets close to Martel, but he doesn't get him. Then he kind of gets his hands on him, but kind of doesn't. This match was outstanding. One of my favorite fun WrestleMania matches to ever go back and watch. And like I said, it wouldn't have worked with just anybody. It had to be somebody like Jake the Snake Roberts, one of the great in-ring and crowd psychologists of all time, in order for this to work. A fun match for me to go back and watch. But the best match on this WrestleMania card, to me, beyond question, is Ultimate Warrior versus the Macho King Randy Savage in the retirement match. Now, this had been set up at the Royal Rumble, where before Warrior defended his belt against Sergeant Slaughter, the Iraqi turncoat, Sherry came to Warrior and asked for a title shot for the Macho King should he beat Slaughter. Warrior kind of declined. As a result, later on, when he defended his belt against Slaughter, they attacked him and hit him in the head with the scepter, and that's ultimately how he lost his WWF Championship to Slaughter. So you'd use that as a backdrop now, and now both of their careers are at stake, and you get to this match here at WrestleMania 7. Now, I know 3 years earlier, Macho Man won the title at WrestleMania 4 in the main event, and that was a great signature achievement that really established him as a top guy in the WWF. And I know the next year he would go on to beat Ric Flair at WrestleMania 8 and win the WWF Championship for a second time. But to me, the pinnacle of the greatness of Macho Man Randy Savage is here. It's not WrestleMania 3 in his match with Ricky Steamboat, because let's face it, let's be realistic. That was a great match. Yes, it was. But don't you think it's a lot easier to have a great match with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat than it is to have one with the Ultimate Warrior? And this match stole the show. What a phenomenal story it told. Macho King, getting on the top turnbuckle and dropping repeated elbows on the Ultimate Warrior, and that doesn't work. So he's questioning what the hell he has to do to beat this guy. Then at one point in time, Warrior can't beat the Macho King, and he's talking to his hands, and he's talking to the gods, and he's acting like he's going to walk out because he doesn't think that he's got enough, and that maybe it's time for him to hang it up. This match to this day captivates me, and it draws me in and sucks me in, even though I know what's going to happen, even though I know what the result is going to be. It doesn't matter. And to me, for the Macho King, the Macho Man, Randy Savage, to be able to go out there and have a match of the night with an Ultimate Warrior, that means something. Warrior Hogan at WrestleMania 6, that was a match of the night, yes, no question about it. But that was an entirely different type of match. Savage was able to take Warrior and do entirely different things with him than Warrior did. This, to me, was Warrior's best ever match that I saw him in. And in terms of what he accomplished and what he was able to get done with the opponent that he had in the ring, this is still, to me, one of Savage's greatest matches ever, if not his best match ever. And it goes beyond just even the match. After Warrior beats Randy Savage and Savage's career, everybody realizes, oh my God, Savage is going to be gone. He's done. No. Here's Sherry to turn on him. And then throughout the whole match, they've shown Miss Elizabeth out there in the crowd watching and kind of painfully cheering on Macho Man Randy Savage. And she comes down to the ring and she gets rid of Sherry. And then you set up this wonderful, magnificent moment. It didn't matter if 1984. It just didn't matter, because for us as fans, a lot of us didn't know that, frankly, at that time. But what we did know
is that for years, here was Miss Elizabeth. She was the Macho Man. The Macho Man was Miss Elizabeth and all of this other stuff. And we always felt that they should be together. They were destined to be together. That they loved each other and they didn't even know it. Both of them. And then here's like this ultimate pinnacle, this ultimate apex of this storyline, and it played out for several years. It meant so much to see the Macho Man embrace Miss Elizabeth, and that's why it ended up being what SummerSlam 91 was built around, because it meant that much at that time. When you take years into something and invest people into a concept, into an idea, and then you give them this pinnacle, this feeling of awesome, this feeling of relief, there's nothing that can really match up to it, frankly. And that's just the way it is. And then you get to the main event here. And you talk about Hulk Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter for the WWF Championship. Now, in the 80s, there were a lot of guys that were becoming household names in the WWF. And Hulk Hogan was the pinnacle in terms of being a household name.
But I think a name that gets left out a lot of times for just how big of a star he was and just how much of a household name he truly was is Sergeant Slaughter. During the Super Bowl this year, when you saw that Radio Shack commercial talking about the 80s called and they want their store back, there were two wrestlers that appeared. It wasn't Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. It was Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter. When you talk about Sergeant Slaughter, I don't think a lot of younger fans understand just how well known he was, just how much of a truly household name he truly was. To this day, when you go on eBay, try to order some Sergeant Slaughter figures, some G.I. Joes. See how much they are. This was fucking G.I. Joe. This was a guy that became a household name in this country and around the world through his work with Hasbro and G.I. Joe, and missed out on the first 6 WrestleManias. So he wasn't even with the WWF at the time that they were taking over wrestling and taking over the entire fucking world. Sergeant Slaughter still managed through his work with G.I. Joe to become a household name that you could almost argue would even rival Hulk Hogan in terms of facial and name recognition, even to this day. To this day. Lots of people that have never watched professional wrestling will obviously know who Hulk Hogan is, but I think you might be surprised just how many people know who Sergeant Slaughter is. That's the G.I. Joe guy. That's Sergeant Slaughter. So now you take these two incredibly well-known household names all around the world, one of them being the white meat all-American babyface, the personification of patriotic red, white, and blue training, prayers, and vitamins awesomeness in Hulk Hogan, and you pit him against a guy who I thought, frankly, was always better as a heel, but the American hero, G.I. Joe himself, Sergeant Slaughter, the now Saddam Hussein sympathizing Iraqi turncoat, and you have them face off for the WWF Championship. Was this a 5-star masterpiece? Oh, hell no. Was this one of these great epic collisions that people will remember forever? No. But it did mean a lot at that time. And it ultimately was a great main event match that sent the people home happy as the white meat all-American babyface Hulk Hogan conquered the Iraqi evil, the Saddam sympathizing Iraqi turncoat Sergeant Slaughter, and brought the WWF Championship back to the United States of America. I mean, this is in the build-up to this match at WrestleMania 7. You got Slaughter sitting there and burning the Hulk Rule shirt. It's not the flag, but it wasn't that much different. It got a huge reaction. Slaughter was getting hate all around the world for what he was doing. And here comes Hulk Hogan in to save the day. You know, with the backdrop of what was going on at this time, this show really delivered. And to me, when you look at the greatness of Savage and Warrior, you look at the importance and significance of Hogan and Slaughter in the main event, and some other good matches and memorable things that happened on this card, I think often this card gets forgotten about. I mean, for God's sakes, the Legion of Doom was here and they squashed the Powers of Pain. Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich beat the hell out of Dino Bravo. Fuck yeah. There were all types of things that happened on this card. And when you watch this show, I think sometimes people don't understand just how good this show really was. To me, like I said, it's the 5th greatest WrestleMania of all time, and it bothers me that it doesn't quite get the respect that it deserves. And I'm sure some of you are going to sit there and disagree with me talking about, oh, imagine that, the Muscle Mark Schleg Daddy trying to shit on Steamboat Savage. No, really, truly think about it. What match to you is better? Steamboat Savage at WrestleMania 3? Or the match with Warrior at WrestleMania 7 that actually went longer than the Intercontinental title match at WrestleMania 3 that had more on the line, the retirement match. And then when you look at the story that was told even after the match, this to me was the pinnacle of greatness for the Macho King, the Macho Man, Randy Savage, and was the greatest WrestleMania match that the Ultimate Warrior ever had. And frankly, I think the greatest match that he ever had. A great WrestleMania that I think doesn't to this day get the due and respect that it deserves for being how good it really was.